Okay, hello everyone. I'm very excited today because of my guest, and I'm going to welcome you all over for this session that we're going to have with Dani A.Mundy. For the people who don't know her personally, then I'm going to introduce Dani a bit to all of you. Well, Dani has worked in the ELT industry since 1998. And she's a trainer, she's a perfect lecturer, she's a writer, a very good one, and a consultant, which is like an amazing thing. So she has delivered a lot of lectures and training sessions globally. That's going to start with Singapore, Malaysia, Kurdistan, South Korea, and Sri Lanka. Am I right, Dani?
Yes, that's right. Yes, very global.
Perfect. So not just this, she has also delivered courses in TESOL.
Okay. Well, so ELT, English as a foreign language. Whenever I come to Pakistan, I'm always blown away because the teachers that I meet and train are very, very passionate. So I think that's quite similar to around the world. We're all doing the job because it's something we enjoy and we want to get the best out of the students. From response I've had when I've ran training sessions in Pakistan, I think sometimes the teachers feel like they need more training and more delivery in certain areas, which maybe we have more influence of in the UK. So they're always saying more training, more training, more training. And they really like interactive training sessions that gets everybody involved, perhaps looking at different techniques that they haven't seen before. So when I was in Pakistan last January, we looked at quite a few different techniques. And because it was quite new to them, all the teachers, it was quite interesting. They could go away and try the practice in their classrooms. And they really, really enjoyed kind of learning new things. So I think that's the benefit of training in countries, because they pick up new ideas, maybe new techniques. And even if you've been teaching for a really long time, so I've been teaching for 20 years, but I still attend lectures and webinars and different conferences because I think we all pick up different ideas from each other regardless of how long we've been teaching. So I always feel whenever I come to Pakistan that they're always very, very appreciative, very grateful, but they really take it quite seriously, all the new initiatives and techniques, and implement them in the class, because I often get lots of emails saying we've done this and it worked really well and we did this. So I think it very much as a language, learning English as a foreign language is about sharing ideas together globally and helping each other as we go along.
That's wonderful. 20 years. Wow, Dani, that is really impressive. Now I get the point why and how you are so perfect with everything, as far as your genre is concerned. Okay, so question number 2, and it's really very important because this is sort of related with the first question. So tell me the greatest impact a teacher's trainer can make. What's the difference where you feel, because I want your personal opinion in this, that what you actually feel that, which area is that can make a real impact, the core.
Okay. Yeah, the core. Okay, so I think the most important thing is your passion for your subject. So whenever I deliver training, as I'm sure many other English language trainers do globally, we do it because we love it, and it's something delegates who we train will always say, we can see how much you enjoy your subject, the passion that you've got for it. And I think that's the most important thing, regardless of whether maybe you're training towards more grammar or pronunciation or skills or different areas. You've got to have that passion and be able to deliver something in quite an engaging way. So it's about interacting with your audience as well. So I'm sure many people are laughing at me at the moment because I'm always moving my hands constantly. And again, that's because of training, the whole idea about body language and gestures and how that imparts on your audience, whether they're teacher trainers or students is really, really important, because again, not everything is through spoken production. We can give so much just through body language and gestures. So please excuse me moving my hands on the screen, because it looks quite funny on a small computer screen, but again, as a language kind of trainer, this is what we do all of the time. And again, I think that shows the passion. So for me, passion is the most important thing for your subject. So for me, I always say to myself, the minute I stop loving my subject, I will stop doing it and look at doing something else. And how you interact. So it's got to be engaging, interesting. So even if you're teaching or training something that's quite dull, there's always a way to make it interesting and motivating. So when you have your audience in front of you, they're interested, they're engaged. And that's really important, because I would never want anyone to be falling asleep on any of my training programs.
No, I'm pretty sure about that. No, interactive is one, one part which is like extremely important. Okay, this is wonderful, Dani, because you are actually right. One thing that while you were speaking, one thing that just popped in my head, and I really want you to sort of focus on that. You talked about grammar and you talked about, other things. We'll discuss those later on, but about this specifically, the grammar part. So what naturally, I think most of the people are going to agree is that over here, when it comes to English language, the grammar is not that focused. Well, most of the time what happens is that where you must have experienced it, that if you ask, or maybe if you haven't, please in your session next time, please ask how many people have really attended grammar classes. So okay, so keeping that thing in mind and keeping that part, that there is a sort of a lag right there. So what do you actually think? How important is grammar?
Okay, it's quite a controversial question, and you will get very different answers depending on who you will speak to. My main objective is always, when I'm teaching with my students, is I'm geared by them. So if my students have to pass an exam, then grammar is quite important, because they need to really focus on accuracy. If I'm teaching English for academic purposes at the university, then grammar is important, because they need to write their dissertations, they need to write their essays, and accuracy is really important. But sometimes, just for general English, there's much a focus on communicative speak and a communicative approach, where perhaps we focus more on fluency rather than accuracy. And I think grammar has a place and it is important, but sometimes we also have to think that maybe if our students make basic errors in spoken English because they've used the wrong tense or they haven't put in a preposition, they can still be understood. So I think we need to decide that if mistakes don't impede the meaning and they can still communicate their ideas, then actually if they make mistakes and their grammar isn't 100%, it doesn't matter so much. But it really depends on how the learners are studying and what their end objective is. So again, if they're doing academic English, it's really important. If they need to pass any English exams, then obviously, again, it's quite important. So definitely depends on their learning objectives, why they're learning English.
Okay, that's actually very nice, because most of the times that when you speak with people, they're very rigid about grammar. And well, of course, it is a very important tool to deal with the language. But then again, it is just a tool. So I completely agree with you, Dani. So now I'm going to change the focus a little. I'm going to twist it around a bit. So why selecting this field as a professor? I'm going to focus it back on you. And why selecting this field as a professor? Give us 2 or 3 good reasons, except for the one that you gave at the beginning, that was passion. So let's have from you 2 or 3 other reasons.
Okay, so why I chose this as a profession? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, so I think for me, Yeah, for me personally, my grandfather was Greek Cypriot, and he had very, very broken English when I was growing up. And it's something that fascinated me because sometimes his pronunciation was a bit strange, or he used words and phrases that I couldn't quite understand. So it really influenced me to follow this path. And my other grandfather, he was English, but we were very lucky that he had a house in Spain. So we used to spend a lot of our summers in Spain. So I started to pick up Spanish and got really, really interested in language and how it sounds and being able to communicate. So even when I was quite young, going to restaurants and ordering food and so forth. And I think that's definitely, they're the two reasons. So both my grandfathers are probably the reason why I chose English language teaching. And I think for anybody else, it's, when I look back on my career, I've traveled the world, and that's because of my job. So I've been really, really lucky. I've met some amazing people along the way, and I've learned lots of different techniques. So when I'm traveling to different places, people do things differently. You learn about new cultures, you taste some amazing food. And I'm sure if I hadn't been in English language teaching, I never would have come to Pakistan. So obviously I've got to come to places that maybe I wouldn't have visited previously. And Pakistan's such a wonderful place for shopping, for food. So yeah, I think it's an adventure when you're kind of in the profession of English as a foreign language. And I hope my children, I'm encouraging them to do their initial courses and just to go and travel for a year to meet different people, to learn about different cultures. And I think it makes you very, very open-minded, which is really, because we live in such a global society, and actually we should be very open-minded about different languages, different cultures, and really kind of learn with each other.
Oh, that's so sweet, because you've just, brought in Pakistan. I can't put up more questions on you, Dani. Okay, Dani, I'm just going to deliver very quick appreciation that's just coming on my window. So I'm just going to, everybody is saying hi. Can you read all these comments? The ones that are being appeared on the window. Can you see these?
No, let me press comments and see.
Okay, so no, I'm going to just quickly just pick a few so that you know what people are saying. Mr. Hashmi is saying, really good to see you both again with another informative talk. So I think people like our team. Okay, and then Mateen is agreeing with him. And so I thank them from your side and mine. Then Shanila is saying, great job. And then, so everybody, okay, so everyone right over here, I want all of you to give us questions so that Dani can reply to. I have a lot of questions for you, Dani. I think this is going to take us most probably 2 sessions. But if there are questions coming from the, from people, I'll be more than happy that Dani should be able to answer those, because I'm sure that, I'm not the only one who wants to, get the fruit from Dani. So, okay, so this is great session from North Asia. So, Dani, this is nice that everybody, and Ray Rock is saying welcome, Dani. So, cut a long story short, everybody loves you and everybody loves to see you. So, this is just wonderful. Okay, so Dani, I'm going to, move to the question, guys. If you have any questions, just put them up here and I can ask Dani whatever that you want to get some information about. Okay, Dani, from my end, because there've been a little, discussion in Read Pakistan, and a few questions that we have really come across. Is one of them is that because TESOL is a technical subject, and I really wanted, even in the last session, if you remember, I wanted you to speak about TESOL a bit. And even in this session, I really want that you should tell people what TESOL is, in a gist, and then we can sort of move forward, because this is one thing that not everybody is going to, of course, if we have teachers on board, yes, they would be knowing about it, but I want the general, people who have joined us, general public, to know what TESOL is all about. So please, tell us a bit about TESOL.
Yeah. Okay. So with TESOL, and it really is teaching English as a second or other language. But along comes many different acronyms for TESOL. So there's ELT, which is English language teaching, TEFL, which is teaching English as a foreign language, and then there are so many other abbreviations. But basically, it's the focus of teaching English to other people. So it can be in different areas. In England, I can teach English in schools because we have quite a global community, and that would be EAL. So it's English as an additional language. So also, we have many different people from all over the world that live and work in the UK, and that would be classed as ESOL, so English as a second or other language. And it depends what you teach, depending on the context. So for people that are living and working in the UK, perhaps it's more functional English that they need. They need to be able to communicate in their job. They need to be able to talk to teachers at their children's school, for example. And then maybe if I came to Pakistan and I was teaching TESOL, it could be maybe in a private language school. It could be sessions in the public schools, for example, because I think the children in Pakistan learn English at quite a young age, which is great because actually in England, children start learning languages quite late. So TESOL is all related to teaching English, and again, in so many different forms because English is such a global language. So people need English for so many different reasons. It could be for their job. It could be to enter into a university. It could be for a particular profession. A lot of professions and research and publications are actually more in English often than in other languages. So TESOL kind of really embodies so many different things depending on the need for English in people's lives. Okay.
Oh, that's so true and very elaborative, Dani. Dani, I have a question from Mohammed Israr, and it's very important because we were just talking about grammar like a minute ago, and the question that he's put up is like really interesting. He says, how to improve English grammar? Should we practice it or memorize it?
Okay.
Oh my God. Yeah. So memorize it.
Oh, good question. Really good question. Okay. Lovely question, Mohammed. Okay, so you will find if you ask a question to different teachers, they would give you different answers. I think personally you need to practice, because when you practice something, you activate it in your brain. Because often you have prior knowledge about something, and what you need to do is to practice to activate it, to make sure that all of the language you're learning, you're using, and the more that you practice and activate it, the better you should be. Memorization is quite antiquated, so it's quite an old method. When I learnt Latin at school, we memorized everything. So I can tell you all of my Latin verbs now, bo, bis, bit, bimus, bitis, bunt. I can't remember anything else because we just memorized it very quickly. So I think if you're actually using it for a purpose, it's much better to practice it and be able to use it in reality, because actually sometimes we memorize things, but we have to think with language. If you're using it in communication, maybe somebody doesn't ask you exactly what you've memorized, so therefore your answer will need to change anyway. So I think practice in as many different ways you can. And actually, because we're here with Read Pakistan, one of the best things you can do to practice your grammar is to read books in English, because when you're reading unconsciously, what you're doing is going through grammar that's written perfectly. So I've always said to my children, the best way to remember spelling, punctuation, and grammar and extend your vocabulary is to read as much as possible, because when you're reading, you notice it and then you will remember.
That's
so
perfect,
definitely a lot more practice.
Yeah. Yes. So Mohammed, you've got your answer now. Okay, Dani, what difference can be made in Pakistan through teachers training, keeping in mind the global response? Well, basically, I started with this, and I think it's more of a culture thing. So I would like to add one thing on top of it, like cherry on the top.
Okay.
So in your opinion, what is the biggest responsibility of a teacher's trainer? Now you're going to tell me again about yourself.
Okay, so a teacher trainer, one, you need knowledge, okay, because you have to impart that knowledge. But again, it goes back to what you asked me before. It's how you impart that knowledge with your audience and how you interact with them. So it's got to be interesting, engaging. Again, I always say passionate. You need to be passionate, and the people you're training need to see that. But they also need to see some purpose of what you're delivering to them. If you just deliver on a PowerPoint and go through and give them information, there's no real interest there. So we need to think about really interactive ways of engaging with our audience, interest and believe everything we say. So again, I think it kind of reflects to what we said before. You need passion. You need to make things interesting. How you conduct yourself with your body language. So I never sit down. I'm always moving around. I try and make sure I speak to everybody. So even if I've got a huge group, what I often do is I just keep on the mic and I keep walking around. So then it doesn't feel like I'm just stood at the front with maybe some of the people who are sat at the front, and it feels like everybody's involved. And that's quite similar to a classroom situation. We're creating a safe learning environment. If I can involve everybody, and I'm always smiling and then everybody feels quite safe in my session and my company. And that's what we should be doing as teachers as well in the classroom, so that when we ask a question, no one's really afraid to answer or respond. And that's exactly how it should be in our classrooms as well. So I think the smile is also very, very important.
Oh, yes, very important, Dani. And you're always smiling. I know that for a fact. Okay, Dani,
Yeah.
So
Not at
as a
home.
teacher, well, as a teacher, Dani, you are perfect. Obviously, you're a trainer, you're a writer, but you're a mother as well. So let's have it from that perspective, because I'm sure that many of us, even over here, who are having the session live, they must be parents and they must be concerned. And I think, well, a part of us is yes in the classroom or with people outside, but I want you to just put a bit of focus on the area where their parenting is involved. Say, for instance, if a parent needs to be more elaborative, more interactive towards the child, then in that case, because you being a parent as well, you will be able to understand the difference between a parent and a teacher and the pros and cons of both. So can you just put a light on that too, please?
Okay, no problem. So for those of you that don't know me, I've got 3 children. So my oldest son is 16 and started college this week. So I'm feeling very old. My middle son is 11 and he's just started secondary school or high school this week. And then my daughter Alia, she's 4. So today, actually, she started primary school for the first time. So it's really interesting looking at the different ages and maybe the different ways that I've interacted with my children. So I think, obviously, we've been in lockdown in the UK, as I'm sure you have been in Pakistan. So we've had 6 months as a family at home. So I've tried to incorporate many different ideas with the children. So even if they've had homework set from school, we've looked at different ways to make it more interesting. They've kept journals. So we've gone out, even in the garden, we planted some seeds at the beginning of lockdown to grow strawberries and lettuce and other things, and the kids kind of made a diary of it. They checked the plants every day to see if they're watered. Even though this isn't homework from a book, it's still something that's very educational. So I think with our own children, we need to look at what they enjoy and think about how we can integrate that into educating them at home. So we do quite a lot of exercise as a family as well. So we go to the gym, and I think that's really important because it's talking about being healthy. There's a huge obesity crisis in the UK with people eating junk food and being really unhealthy. So even though, again, going to the gym, it's not a real focus on education, it's teaching the children that they need to look after their body. And they need to think about doing exercise and not just sitting at home on their PCs playing food that's not very good for them. Reading, I'm always encouraging the children to read as much as possible. I often sometimes give money incentives for reading if they're not feeling very keen at work. So they've been reading lots of different books and cooking as well. So again, maybe it doesn't seem typically educational, but actually it's great because with the two younger children, they're measuring ingredients. So they're looking at things numerically. They're looking at timings for the oven and different things. So I think I've had to be quite inventive during coronavirus in how we can educate, keep them interested, because they were staying at home with just myself and my husband and no school and no friends and not meeting any family. So again, we've done lots of creative things and maybe turned it into something more educational. So they've had to do some writing on it. With the youngest one, maybe more about just painting, reading books. And something else we've been doing with the younger two is maybe watching something on YouTube, but having no sound and getting them to kind of recreate their dialogue for something. So maybe find a cartoon that the children really like, play a short clip to them, turn off all the sounds so it's silent and say, okay, come up with the dialogue now. And I got them to role play together. Then they did a little bit of writing. So I think we've been really inventive during coronavirus, and maybe I've done a lot more normally do, because the older children, they go to school, they have their homework. I always want to see what their homework is and ask them if they need any help. So I'm interactive in that way. But I think with coronavirus, we've had to pay so much more attention, because I'm not sure about in Pakistan, but in England, some schools send work home. Some schools haven't sent so much work home. There's a real pressure on the parents to become teachers. And actually, if you've never taught before, that's really difficult and quite a headache as well. So again, I think we just tried to keep it quite relaxed, because I think if I suddenly said, right, I'm the teacher, you've got to do this like you do at school, my children would be, we're not listening. So we've kind to make it a bit more relaxed, interactive, do short sessions rather than really long sessions where they get bored and they're quite demotivated. And always think about personalization. So whether this is yourself as a teacher or yourself as a parent, think about what your children really, really enjoy and try and integrate that into some activity. And then they've got that pleasure and motivation before you start doing anything. So I think personalization is really, really important.
That's so true. And you've actually answered Mateen's question. Over here, she asked, due to COVID-19, schools are closed and children don't pay attention in studies. Well, Mateen, you've got your answer, because Dani just told us that how you can engage them in studies. Number one, Dani was saying that this is personalization. You create the interest, that you kind of instigate their interest level, and then you can move forward. Secondly, you can always play with them, like through small games, like Dani did with her children, that she was playing a cartoon without the sound, and the clips were being organized, they were mimicked, or they were recreated by their mind. So there are a couple of things that you can do. So Mateen, you've got your answer from Dani. I mean, I never had to say it, but Dani said it all in herself. Okay, so another Ubaid is saying it's better to watch a YouTube video about a certain topic or to find a book about and read. Oh, it's more or less a question to read Pakistan, but Dani, you need to reply to this.
Okay, Ubaid, great question. Sometimes you have to think about the learning styles of the children, and maybe if you don't have a teaching background, that's something you don't really think about. So often we categorize learners into something called VARK. So V for visual, A for oral, R for read write, and then K for kinesthetic. And different people respond very differently to different things. So I think your question, I can't definitely say reading is better than a YouTube video, because actually a child might need both of them to really consolidate and understand the topic. Some children may be quite reluctant to read. This can happen. My oldest son was quite a reluctant reader. So perhaps with him, I would play the YouTube video first and then do the reading, because the video first might capture his attention. and then create some interest. So when we come to the reading, he's less reluctant to read. Whereas with other students, they need to do the reading first because maybe their reading is better than listening. So we have to think about the learning styles. And it depends what we're teaching as well. Is there a particular learning objective? Sometimes we watch a video after to consolidate what we've read. But again, if they're reluctant to read, then play the video first and then do the reading. So there's no kind of right or wrong answer. I think always look at the child or the student and think about their learning styles and how they enjoy learning, and kind of use that and factor that in when you're planning any kind of activity for them.
That's actually, you're so right about this, Dani, because then I remember in a session that in a seminar, actually, I was asked if there are any books, good books or bad books. Of course, there are good books and bad books, but then again, we need to know and we have to extract the best out of those. And then there comes a time when you actually know what you want to go through. So, well, that, Obed, your question has been quite nicely answered. I'm not sure, but I'll go scroll back a bit, because there was, Dani, I remember reading it, that somebody has asked you, which is your favorite book? And let me just go back to the person who asked this question. But till that time, please tell them which is your favorite book.
Okay, right. At the moment, I seem to be reading more children's books than anything, because I work for Penguin Random House. So I'm always being sent so many books because I have to deliver webinars and different things on them. So unfortunately, I don't have that much time to read. I love reading books in Spanish, and I love Spanish literature. So when I was at university, I studied Gabriel Garcia Marquez. So it's quite old Spanish literature. But this is something I really enjoy because I don't have much time to my language studies anymore. And I can't get to Spain because of coronavirus. So for me to pick up a book in Spanish, which is my kind of second language, then that's something that I really enjoy. So I love Spanish literature.
Oh, great. Well, that was Hassan. I just scrolled back and saw who was the person who asked the question. So, well, Hassan, well, you'll have to, if you're a big fan of Dani, then you'll have to go through Spanish yourself. So now another question from Hassan Ali. He says, how can we protect and guide children while still allowing them to be children and learn by making mistakes? This is nice.
Very good question. Yes, I don't think I have all the answers, even though I have 3 children, because I still make lots of mistakes as a parent. And actually, my 3 children are so different in personality that I've probably parented them in different ways. So I think sometimes it's about allowing them a little bit of independence. So, for example, my middle son started high school this week, and it's about a 20-minute walk from my house. And I don't drive. I've never driven. I've never learned to drive. I don't know why. And I think I'm over 40. I'm probably a bit too old to learn. So he has to walk to school. And this is something I've really been battling with, because I think, is it safe? Do I need to walk with him? Shall I take him halfway? Whereas actually we've kind of compromised. So I think, Hassan, the biggest answer really is to compromise with children. And I think if we kind of always tell them it should be this way, it should be this way, sometimes they kind of go in the opposite direction. Whereas if you can sit and discuss with them and say, okay, well, this is what I think, what do you think? And then maybe you meet in the middle, there's kind of mutual respect from the parent to the child and from the child to the parent. And that seems to be how I've kind of approached it with my children, rather than always just saying no. We discuss and we talk about it together, and we kind of reach compromise together. So then they know that if they do something wrong, actually that's a mistake that they've made, but we can figure it out together and then move forward. I think it's really difficult nowadays because it's a different world. If I look back to when I was at school, it's very, very different now. I think the biggest protecting and guidance we need is actually with anything digital, because I'm not sure in Pakistan, but a lot of the children here in the UK have had tablets and phones and computers that they've been doing a lot of work on. So I think the biggest thing here is them allowing them to go and play their games and to do work in a digital fashion, but just really making sure they're safe. So I think digitally, that's something we really need to protect and guide the children. So make them aware that, you know, it's not always safe in the digital world, and kind of, again, that's communicating with them. So I think the biggest thing is having open communication with your children, whether they're your children or your students, so they know they can always come to you. So my children, even if they do something terrible, they know that they can come to me. And yes, they might get into a little bit of trouble and there might be a consequence, but we can always discuss it and go through it together and work out a better way. And I'm confident that even if they made a really bad decision, that they would come to me realizing they made a bad decision, because the communication is always open. And I think that's really, really important. They know that they can always come to me no matter what. I'm always going to be their mum. And we all make mistakes. Even as adults, we make mistakes all the time. And I think we need to bear that in mind with our children, because often as adults, we kind of, there's that power of saying no to the child. And I think we need to self-reflect on ourselves, because we make mistakes, all of us, every single day. So if adults can still be making mistakes, we need to sometimes be a bit more considerate with the children as well, if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes perfect sense, Dani. And I think you're so right about it, because now we also need to learn. You were just saying in the beginning that over there in UK, all this gadgetry is being used. Over here in Pakistan as well, a lot of gadgetry is being used by children now. And they have their homeworks because of COVID as well. They have their homeworks, they have their e-classes, they have a lot going on. And other than that, I've seen a big change. There's a huge change that has come up, and people are really giving tabs and, you know, phones to their children and everything. So where I think that you are, you know, the golden principle that you have given is that we need to understand them. We need to communicate to them and let them communicate to us as well. Because in that case only, we all would be able to, you know, let go of the things, understand them in a better way. So I think you have just dealt with it so perfectly. Okay, we have a question from Momina. Well, Dani, she says, do you think video subtitles might help kids who are reluctant readers slowly make the transition? Oh, I'm sorry, they're just skipping a bit. Slowly make the transition from watching videos to reading. So, okay, she's asking about the transition. So, video subtitles might help kids.
Okay, that's really, really interesting question, Momina. I think subtitles can be useful. I think the problem I have with subtitles is often they're quite inaccurate. So my son was studying French last year and it was his least favorite subject. And for me, as someone who learns languages, I got really frustrated because he would go and Google Translate everything for his homework. And he would say, "Mum, have a look." And I speak French, and I would say to him, "It's wrong. Where have you got this from?" I could tell immediately that he translated. So I can see what you're saying. Video subtitles could be really useful to students, especially if they're maybe not so good at watching something and they need that something written down as reassurance for them. But we just have to make sure that there's no inaccuracies, because often the grammar can be quite different. And also there can be quite a lot of first language interference with subtitles. So if the subtitles maybe have just mistakes and different words, and so the vocabulary doesn't always make sense. So if the subtitles are really good quality, then perhaps it could be something quite useful. However, I think sometimes we need to think about the natural world and think maybe, okay, we can't have subtitles in real life. And sometimes with listening activities, it's much better for them to listen and just try and grab a few words and make sense of it. Because even as native speakers, if we're watching a film or listening to music, we don't listen to everything and we're not translating everything. We're getting the gist or kind of the general idea. So yeah, I don't think I've answered your question that well, actually, because with subtitles, I don't know. I think if the quality is really good and it's actually giving the correct meaning, it could be quite useful. But I know from experience, even just as a language learner, So when I went to the cinema and it was in Spanish and the subtitles were on, I could see that there were mistakes in them. So it depends. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great. So that answers, some questions over here as well, and Momina's question too. Okay, so now Noor is asking you a question. She says, do you prefer fiction or non-fiction books? So, okay, generally, I'm
Okay.
going to add this as well, because you should tell that you like or prefer fiction, non-fiction books. And well, please also add that for fiction books and non-fiction books, both have pros and cons. So I want you to be a little elaborative, so people who like
Okay.
fiction can also know that there are plus points, there are pros to a fiction book and to a non-fiction book as well. So go that way, please.
Okay, right. No, that's a really good question. And actually, when I travel with different companies, especially with Penguin for reading, it's really an interesting point, the difference between fiction and non-fiction. And what I found often is if you have reluctant readers in your home, in your family, in your class, often it's because they don't like the whole idea of maybe a beginning and middle and an end of a whole story. Whereas actually, if they're reading something that's non-fiction, that is maybe fact-based or scientific-based, it can be just as effective as a reading skill, but it creates that interest. And if you look at the market nowadays, especially for children's books, there are so many more non-fiction books nowadays, and really they're aimed at reluctant readers who don't like reading long passages, but they're still reading books with lots of vocabulary, the grammar's still in there, but maybe in shorter pieces. And it can be really, really useful. So I would say non-fiction are really good if you've got children that don't like reading books, and it can really grab their attention and get them used to reading. And then suddenly you'll find they may start reading more fiction. Myself personally, I really read both. Just because of the nature of my job, I try and read as much as I possibly can. So I always have so many books in my house, and I would say half and half on my bookshelf. Some are fiction, some are non-fiction. And I think it's always good to read different genres of books and different types of books. So yeah, I think, and reluctant readers, non-fiction can be really, really useful. And even if students or people in general prefer fiction, give non-fiction a go. It can be a really different reading experience. Okay.
That is so true, because you are so right about that, Dani. There are people, for making them readers, we have to actually tell them, as far as Read Pakistan is concerned, there are questions coming up. And usually what happens is that people ask, how can we be good readers? And we have to tell them that you can start with a 15-minute session and start reading. And then that session would automatically, generate on its own. You will start to love books at the end of the day, how to inculcate the habit of reading and everything. So yes, you are really right about that. Okay, one question, how can we actually, because this is something that comes up and I have a lot of answers for this. I have at different forums told people how they can develop the habit of reading. But that has come from my side and from the research papers that I have been through. I want you, especially as a trainer, as a consultant, to tell people generally how they can inculcate and develop the habit of reading, except for a few things that generally are known to people, like starting up reading for 15 minutes, then starting up with fiction and everything. So other than that, how can we develop the habit of reading?
Okay. The habit of reading, I think, is very much it depends on the person. It depends on what you like. So I spoke about personalization before in the classroom and for learning styles. That's exactly the same for book and book choice. Many people may be reluctant to read because in their head they think of reading as Shakespeare or really difficult literature, and actually they just want to read something for pleasure. So then encourage them to find something that maybe is related to their hobby. So it could be fishing, cooking, whatever it may be. Then topic you're interested in and start to read books related to that to get into good habits, because if it's a topic you enjoy, you're more likely to finish and to continue reading and then get into the good habit of reading. I always give the example of my oldest son. He was a very reluctant reader, and I bought so many books and I tried hundreds to try and get him interested in reading, because I said to him, if you read, you will speak better, your vocabulary will be better, your grammar will be better. And we found Diary of a Wimpy Kid, which I'm sure you all know. It's a book by Penguin. And Diary of a Wimpy Kid saved life completely. And he started reading them, and then suddenly, because he was interested, it was, Mum, can you buy the next book and the next book and the next book? And then the difference in his language and literature classes was unbelievable. And the teacher said, I can see now reading, because when he's writing lexically, he's much, much better. He's more aware of using correct grammar and punctuation. So Diary of a Wimpy Kid saved our lives. And again, it was something he enjoyed. So it's about finding a hook. If you can find that hook to kind of be really interested and engaged, you will get into reading. No, for me, I love reading. I've always loved reading because my grandmother used to read with me. My auntie used to read with me, and they would give me books all the time, and we would go to the library. And this week I read a book. I just picked a new book. It was one of I can't remember the title. It was a bestseller, and I thought, right, I'm going to get that and just have some pleasure reading. And I finished the book in maybe 3 hours. And my children were really surprised. They were like, oh my goodness, you read so quickly. And I said, it's because it was a book that I enjoyed. So again, if you read it, you have that pleasure for reading, and it doesn't feel like torture or some laborious job that you have to do. So always think about what you really, really enjoy and try and integrate that into your reading somehow, whether you're an adult or a child. And I think that really, really helps. So that personalization.
Great. Yes. Again, that personalization, which is like really, really important. Fatima Suhail is right here, and she asks you, Dani, that do you think that the classics from the 20th century, like Enid Blyton books, are better than today's books? Are they actually better from the 20th century?
Okay, really good question. Enid Blyton was an amazing author, and I've read most of those books, and really, really good. But I think we're lucky nowadays that there are so many more different types of books. So yes, even though the classics, they will always be classics, and they're absolutely fantastic, and they should always have a place in schooling and education, we also have to think about how life is different now, how even when I look at my two sons, there's 5 years between them, for them life is different. The language they use is different. So actually, the older books serve a place, definitely, and I think they were written so well. But actually, we're spoilt for choice nowadays. When you go into a bookshop, there are so many different types of books of every genre to suit every personality. So I think we're really lucky because we can find so many different titles. There's some really, really lovely books nowadays that maybe we didn't have as much choice before. But yes, some of the classics are fantastic, and there's no getting away from that. I think in kind of moderation, have a combination of some of the old books, of some of the newer books, and expose children or even ourselves as adults to many different types of books, rather than saying the older ones are better and the new ones are not so good. I think a lot of the new books for children nowadays are written specifically to get them to read and to keep them engaged. So another series is Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. I don't know if you know those books. And actually they were written for the author wrote them for his sons because they were reluctant readers. So he came up with all these amazing stories and really captivated his sons, and they've become such bestsellers. And actually they they consider both genders as well. Maybe looking at the front cover, you think that they were more based for boys, but actually, if you look at the research behind it and the numbers, it's kind of 50-50 with girls and boys. So yeah, Enid Blyton, I don't think you can get anyone better, but I think we have so many amazing books nowadays that we're kind of, there's so many to choose from.
Yes, that's so true. Blyton is definitely better. But you know, just while just read her question, I was just wondering that you know, we're just casting out a lot of new writers. Recently, well, not recently, a few years back, I started with Elif Shafak's books. And if you've been through those, you would know that even you know, I'm not being prejudiced, but I think that even Elif Shafak, she's from now, and she is amazing. I mean, she has her own language and a genre which is, you know, it's literally superb. So we have another question. Well, this seems to be a little complicated, but I'm sure that Dani, you will be able to answer. Amir Hamza. He says, how can we study the interactive pattern of cross-modality response in reading acquisition using eye tracking?
Okay, so you're talking about when you're reading and going through. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I think it's tricky. It's tricky for me when I'm teaching reading, maybe because a lot of my students are non-native, so it's even more difficult in another language. I think really interestingly, try and start from a young age. So with my children, we've used pointers. So I've made some cards that they cut out in arrows, and when we're reading, I just use them to go along. And then I say to them, okay, if there's something important, stop and keep going through like that, just to get them used to reading in a more efficient way rather than reading every single word individually. And this is something as a foreign language teacher that I see a lot of my students struggle with, because when they're reading in another language, they feel sometimes that if they read slowly, it will be much better for them. But actually, it's probably the opposite, because when they're reading very slowly, they're really focusing on every single word. Actually, it doesn't make sense, because as native readers, what we're doing is we're reading through, and it's like when we're listening, we're pulling out the most important bits of information. So sometimes in class, I do timed reading activities to stop the students reading so slowly, or sometimes I would get students to cross out all grammar words. So any prepositions, any articles, all the small words, the, in, of, and just say cross them out, because actually in that context, they're not so important. We need to focus on the content words. So there's different strategies that you can use depending on the child or the student. If you can integrate it at a young age, getting them to track what they're reading and going through, it's really, really important. So again, we just use finger pointers that were quite useful. With my older students and even some of my uni students, just things like highlighters, as long as they can highlight in the books that they're reading, and get them to think about, okay, when you're reading, highlight something that's important, and don't read every single little word, because again, it's like you're pulling information out for the gist or for something more specific or for more detail. So again, it could depend on learning styles as well.
Yeah. Yes, one of the learning styles, like you said, Dani, we used to tell people in Read Pakistan, all sorts of people come in. So I used to tell them that for techniques, you can encircle the important parts, in a para, or maybe you can just, like you said, highlight them or encircle the important parts, or just simply, yes, like you said, cut off, the little vocabulary that they have in the para, so that they can make a better, sound of it, or maybe they can make a better meaning out of it. So, Amir, your answer, I think you've gotten your answer. Well, we have Ubaid. Ubaid. There are many good children magazines available in the market. Okay, now, so Talim or Tarbiyat, okay, these are Urdu, literature. So they're saying that there are a lot of good magazines available in the market. But it is very interesting. Okay, Ubed, I did see a question here because after etc. you've just put 3 dots. So if you have a question, please put that up for Dani. I have okay, so just 2 more questions because we have very little time to go. So Dani, I'm just going to put 2 more questions up forward for you. We have Sumbul, Ariba, Mateen, not only to read books, but also to improve our grammar. Sumbul, please be kind enough to elaborate it a bit so that, Dani can answer the question in this way. Okay, so Fatima is saying, I teach the daughter of our maid. She's in class 4th and she can read, but the comprehension skill is almost nil. How can I improve that? Now, this is very nice. Fatima, I'm impressed that you're teaching somebody that probably you will have, no benefit from, but you're doing for God, probably just, for his, his favor. So she says that I teach the daughter of my maid. She's in class 4th and she can read, but the comprehension skill is almost nil. How can I improve that? Both her parents are illiterate and can't contribute to her studies very much. This is very important, Dani. Social work.
Yeah, absolutely. Common anyway that children are told they can read, but actually when they do any comprehension tasks, it's very clear that they haven't had a good enough understanding of what they've read. So Fatima, what I would probably do with this girl is sit and read with her more, and do it so like one-to-one if you are with her on a one-to-one basis, and do storytelling but keep asking questions as you're going as much as possible. So sometimes with children, when they're reading in isolation, it's very easy for them to say, yes, I've read it, I've understood it. But then when the teacher asks them questions or they have homework due, it's very clear that the comprehension is just not there. So think about reading with her, really asking questions as you're going along through the book. So rather than her reading a lot of text on her own, try and break it down into chunks and segments and just keep asking questions or elicit from her. So what can you see? What were they doing? Describe the girl and just elicit as much information as you can from her, and then try and get her to put it into formed sentences, and then do it first of all just orally. Okay, so there's no kind of focus on writing and comprehension. Elicit as much as you can, read with her, break it into smaller pieces, and then maybe put it on paper after that with the main question and how you're going to answer. Because if you've spoken about it orally first, she will probably find the comprehension then much easier. So I think in this case, break it down, smaller sections, get her used to looking at things in more detail, describing, explaining, and again, just in spoken production, and then focus on maybe written comprehension, question and answers afterwards. But very common with a lot of children.
Oh, yes, that is such a superb. I'm going to remember that myself, Fatima. You just got your answer. So I missed Ariba's question, and this is going to be the last question. Ariba is asking, hello.
Okay.
I want to ask, as we are students, so much busy with our textbooks. This is when I was a student. I actually faced this as well, Ariba, but I'll tell you how I conquered it. But I want Dani to reply to this. Dani, she asked, I, as a student, I'm so busy with my textbooks and our routine then, how can we schedule our routine to make it our habit to read books?
Okay, yeah, I think this is common for everybody. I found as a mum, I probably read more children's books than I do books for my own pleasure. And when I'm teaching and trying to plan and prepare courses, I'm reading so many books for that. Again, my reading for pleasure goes out the window. So I suppose it depends on your lifestyle and what you have going on in your family life. For me, normally when I put my daughter to bed, that's when I think, okay, now I can breathe, I have a bit of time, what can I do? And then I am more likely to pick up a book. Because if I try and pick up a book now, for example, my 3 children are all running around upstairs because I've told them not to come down here. And be noisy. So there would be no point even in 10 minutes picking up a book, because then maybe it would be tea time and somebody knocks on the door and I need to bath my daughter. So I try and have this time. Normally it's about 8 o'clock every night, so that's 8 o'clock English time, and I know she's gone to sleep. The older children might be reading a book or watching something on the television, and it's kind of our downtime home. So I know then I can pick up a book and I won't be interrupted, and I can enjoy the pleasure of reading. But again, it does depend on your family situation, your home life. I would think about just trying to integrate some time into your day when you can think, okay, I'm going to do nothing else now but just for pleasure, and kind of make that time, even if it's just 20 minutes. Because otherwise it's very easy to get out of the habit. Yeah, so this is something I've done a lot during lockdown, and also because I think it's good for our mental health. I've been at home with my husband and 3 children. My house has been really noisy because we're all here together. There's never any rest. So for me, I think, okay, at 8 o'clock, I'm going to start reading. It's before bedtime. It's a relaxing time, and it works quite well like that for me.
Yeah, so basically you need to extract time out on your own. If you think it's a habit worth going for, then you need to make forwards a few steps that are going to pave your ways. So one last question, I'm sorry, because there are a lot of things coming up. Amir Hamza says, can you recommend an instrument for measuring attitudes about reading in children? And the age that he said is 8 till 10.
Okay, so is this reading in their own language or reading in English?
Okay, so basically he hasn't mentioned a language, but I think it should be related with English because, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think if it's related to reading in English, nowadays we're very lucky because there are so many graded readers. So normally when I come to Pakistan, I come with Penguin, and we use 2 types of graded readers. So Ladybird readers, and they're written for EAL learners as well. So it's according to their level and their grammar, and there's lots of different genres and stories. And then they do secondary books, which are Penguin readers, and it's sort of literature. So some of them are maybe Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Some of them are related to more things like Oliver Twist, for example, so classical literature, but it's all graded according to the level. I think graded readers for non-native speakers are really important, because if we give them something that's too lexically demanding or challenging, it will just put them off reading completely. Whereas if the book is suited for their more enjoyable experience for them. And again, the whole idea of personalization. Do they prefer fiction or non-fiction? Because that will help them with the reading as well, if they're interested in the content that they're going to be reading. So try and find.
Yes, perfect, Dani. This is amazing. I've taken 5 extra minutes, but I'm sure that everybody has enjoyed. Everybody has written such nice comments here. Mateen has said, thanks to Read Pakistan. Thank you, Mateen. J.K. Hashmi appreciated me. Then I think Leif appreciated you as well, Mateen. Thank you. Binti Asif has appreciated both of us and said that it's really informative and an interesting session. And then we have Ariba, and she says, I've really enjoyed the session. There are a lot of good comments, and Dani, I'm sure that we want to do this again. People who have just joined us, Bill, I would really like to tell you once again that Dani A.Mundy was with us today once again, and she was, as usual, an amazing, spectacular speaker. And I would also like to add, once again, I would like to tell everybody that she is an ELT expert since 1998. She's been in that industry, and she's a trainer, as well as she's a lecturer and a writer and a consultant. So I'm sure that next time that we're going to be together, all of you people are going to join us. We have a lot coming in. Noor has said, thanks a lot for the amazing session. And Hassan is saying the same. He's thanking you that you've answered his question so nicely. So Dani, thanks a lot for your time. And Read Pakistan, myself as the senior vice chairperson of Read Pakistan, and I think society at large, all of us are really grateful that you have extracted time out for us. This is a complete social work. I know that it's related with your studies, but so many answers get to normal people who don't know. That it's always a pleasure having you. And you are, mashallah, blessed with a lot of knowledge. I'm sure that you will always impart it and give it off to people so that they can benefit from it as well. Thank you, Dani. Thanks a lot for the great sessions.
Okay, you're welcome. No problem. Good Hafiz.
Good Hafiz.